Welcome to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures, with CEO and award-winning author, Yvette Bethel. This podcast is dedicated to providing leaders with solutions to build trust, inspire authentic transformation, and improve engagement. Learn about new and tested ways you can revitalize your culture, empower people, and transform your results.
This is Yvette Bethel, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Evolve. Evolve challenges traditional leadership topics, explores modern leadership models, providing ideas you can use to transform your culture. We focus on leadership through the lens of interconnectivity, flow, and balance. We explore ideas that translate into practical applications for contemporary organizational challenges. In this episode of Evolve, we will explore emerging school leadership and management trends. And to explore this topic with us is educator, author, advocate, and social and emotional learning expert, Sherilyn Leet. Sherilyn's passion is the design of curriculum, assessments, and training about emotional intelligence. Foster excellence around the globe. Sherilyn is a Fulbright scholar and holds a master's degree in curriculum design and instruction for the gifted and talented. She's motivated by the belief that developing emotional intelligence is a fundamental skill for any age. Sherilyn served as an editor for the book Know, Choose, Give, one of the most internationally published emotional intelligence courses for university students and for self-science. Sherilyn co-authored a paper in 2017 for the Journal of Applied Developmental Psychology on the school-wide application of emotional intelligence assessments. Her work has been accepted for presentation at the SW Education, that's correct, and the National SEL, Social and Emotional Learning Conference, and UNICEF. So with that, Sherilyn, I'd love to welcome you to Evolve.
Oh, thank you, Yvette. Such an honor to be invited here today to speak with you. I've been following your podcast and your work in trust building in organizations and think it absolutely applies in the educational setting. So I'm excited about that.
A perfect match then.
Absolutely.
So to get started, we can see that social and emotional learning is central to who you are and your work. And I would love for you to share with my audience about how you got here, how you got on this path.
Sure. Well, when you look at child development, and you always wonder, well, how did I become who I am? There's different spheres that help the cultural development of a child. One of that is the home life, of course. Another might be hobbies that they're involved with, sports or coaches or, trainers if they're musicians. But one thing that we all share in common would be the educational community and culture from which we came and were raised. And I know for me growing up, having a stable school experience where there was some structure, there was a lot of nurturing, there was a lot of engaging academic experience. And I know that is not necessarily the experience of most children around the world. So I feel very fortunate that was such a positive infrastructure for me. And that's part of it, Yvette, is as I interact with professionals all around the world and I ask them for their favorite memories, many say very few positive memories about their early childhood experience.
Really?
It's very sad. Maybe they can think of one individual who primed them and made a difference to go study this new field in college, so to speak. But many have said it took until perhaps graduate school for them to find a mentor and someone in academia who really supported them. And for me, that's just unacceptable. I think we know from the neuroscience and the brain scans of how child's learning takes place, and we have to prioritize that. And we have to recognize that teachers are bonsais of the brain. You send your students.
I love that.
Exactly. You send your students to be, bonsai over time to individuals, sometimes with more hours. Sorry, I'm blanking on that word, but essentially chronological hours than other activities, maybe even than you as the parent. So educators are the soil from which this is happening. What an educator does and doesn't decide to talk about, the attitude, their mood, their personality, their charisma or lack of it, all of that will shape what the child's brain will or will not do for that hour and maybe that year or ongoing. I was actually watching, and I was Netflixing last week. Full disclosure, it was a reality show. It was a Parisian real estate reality show.
Oh.
And it was a group of brothers in the family, and the youngest brother was sharing that his anxiety stems from a very negative experience he had with a teacher in his early years that he has still not been able to overcome. And, now this man is in his late 20s, and he is very successful and still has a chip on his shoulder about overcoming and showing that teacher that indeed he was going to be a success. He was not a failure. He was going to make something of himself. And it made me think, wow, even in modern education, kids are being verbally abused.
I was just going to say, it sounds abusive. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even in certain parts of the United States, corporal punishment is still allowed within the school system, which we know spanking and corporal punishment actually decreases IQ over time. That's what the researchers found. So there's a lot of change that needs to happen.
Interesting. In my country, corporal punishment is quite accepted. Although I don't know if it's happening in the school system as much, but anyway, I digress. I'm curious. I think the audience may be a little bit curious about what is social and emotional learning. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So this big field of social emotional learning is what people used to call the soft skills development. And now anyone in this area now knows those are equally hard and fast skills as maybe mathematics or scientific knowledge. Social emotional learning, as I see it and define it, is it's the process of an individual and collective increase in emotional intelligence skills for personal. So it's this idea that you can strategically track students' progress in these interpersonal and intrapersonal arenas, and observe and nurture and grow these skills just as you would reading, for example. And just like reading, it is a lifelong pursuit. You cannot just take one 20-minute class on reading and say, okay, we mastered that standard and skill, moving on to something else, which is what people think they can do with social emotional learning.
That's true. You are on the inside of the academic system at a time of unprecedented everything. And from your perspective, what are the emerging leadership trends? What's happening?
Well, change leadership is the signaling phrase for today. I would say there are a lot of topics, especially in the education section, but for change readiness.
Could you say that again? There was a bit of a glitch.
Oh, sure. Lead not for perfection, but
Mm,
for change readiness
mhm,
and change action. So there's a tension between among systems of performance and process. And often, especially in academics and in the K 12 school systems, we think that we can track that progress and performance down to the most finite standardized question. And the reality is, in such an evolving marketplace with technology abounding and the focus on 21st century skills for collaboration and communication and cross cultural experiences, just like what we're having right now, if at this type of exchange, this is the future. In my
mm,
role at 6 Seconds, I work almost every Zoom call is with someone from a different culture and society with a different background and identity.
mhm.
And I'm collaborating with those individuals from the morning I get up to the evening, and each day is different and the dynamics are different. There's um, so much context to take into account, and of course there's deadlines to be met in the same breath. So there's this give and take of these relational skills that have become, that I've seen just in the last 10 years of my career, shift to the forefront. And if
Mhm.
we're preparing children for the jobs of tomorrow, you know, we absolutely need to focus on the social emotional skill building for for their success. Mhm.
Something you said just now caused me to think because you talked about performance and process. And, I don't work in the education system as much. I do have some clients, but I do a lot of work in other types of organizations. Now, what I see is when they focus on performance and process, they take their eye off the people side of it, the social side of the interaction. Um, what is being done now that we're even more, I guess, separated by the remote learning? What's being done to bring that social part together, not just through teaching the students how to do it, but really integrating it into the design of how you work remotely?
Oh, fabulous question. I completely agree with you that even within process and product is our people, the human element in both that makes it all worth it. And that's why educators like me are in this field, because of the passion and the belief that um, these children are our future, and
Mhm.
that the exposure to these skills building should be a human right. um, I've seen some very creative, the human component, and try to humanize something like Zoom. I know that you and we've met once in person, but the rest of our relationship development has been online through these Zoom experiences.
That's right.
And so I would say, okay, let's think of what assistant touching base, you know,
Could
setting
you
aside.
excuse me one second? Can you say that again? I seem to be a bit unstable. I want to be
Not
sure
to
that I
worry.
capture everything. That,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Consistent times to touch base
Hmm.
with colleagues is very important, both formal and informal. And what I mean by that is we need structured and unstructured experiences, even
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
So in our organization at 6 Seconds, the program Scrum team, we plan quarterly events or semesterly events where we're just planning about what's due on Friday. We're not talking about, you know, any other stressors at the moment. We're just, the goal is to laugh, reunite, re-engage, and sometimes with remote learning and remote work wane, your why becomes diluted.
Okay. Let me just pause. Okay. So One of the things that you mentioned is that you organized an innovative conference on neuroscience, instructional design, and experiential learning for Silicon Valley. Uh, and what are some, I think my question is, what are some of the solutions to emerging challenges that you would have explored back then that could be applicable now? I'm really curious because, they're innovators.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I worked at the Synapse School, which is the 6 Seconds Laboratory School in Silicon Valley, not too far from Stanford, and they actually have a partnership with the Stanford Educational Psychology Department, where they have researchers on campus working and studying with the children. It's really powerful. And I should also give credit to where credit is due. My partner in crime over there, Katie Morgan, who's an administrator still at Synapse, she and I were kind of the co-directors of the conference. And it was designed to bring in Silicon Valley professionals, not just the parent community of our school, but their friends and colleagues and leadership as well. We brought them to the Synapse campus and we had them engage in various play and experiential learning. And what we mean by that is we took them through the Synapse school day, which, imagine a bit, you come to this conference all proper and dressed up, and the first thing we have you do is get sweaty with all these strangers. I know we had the adults said, "Wait, what's happening?" We said, "Okay, you're going to break into teams for mandatory 20-minute physical education."
Oh, wow.
And we sent them through basic routines, not, granted, if they didn't have appropriate footwear, we made it work, right?
Yeah.
But still, we had physical education for everyone, followed by some quiet reflection, some mindfulness. And then we started the learning process with everyone.
Interesting.
So just the way we crafted the conference, the experience took you through what we believe for K-12 setting. And that absolutely applies to whether you're hosting corporate meetings and retreats or other things. So giving them, I've had, my husband and I have been to tech conferences where the first 2 hours you were encouraged to go either bike ride, go on a hike, or do something else. Because not only are you networking, but you're priming your brain for deeper learning. If you want someone to remember something and you just need to read John Medina if you have any questions about brain-based learning. And he would argue, if you want them to remember anything, get them hot and sweaty first.
Mm-hmm.
And then teach them the math facts, teach them the important corporate values or whatever the meeting was about. Because you'll get some people are awakened, they're more participative, and the results are better as well.
So is that brain-based or is it more physical where you're activating all the cells in the body? Or is it a
Both.
combination of both? Okay.
Absolutely. For brain health and maintenance, cardiovascular activity is very much connected to that blood flow. So then you think about attention span. The average attention span is around 20 minutes, regardless of your age. Now, younger students, right? A 5-year-old might only have a 7-minute attention span.
Yeah.
But once you're, out of your teenage years, professors and bosses alike need to keep that in mind. I've heard people in various industries say, "Oh, rolling eyes, I have to go to my 2-hour meeting," in which they would say, "I know exactly what's going to happen. The agenda's already made. Each person gets a fixed amount of time." And that might not be the most engaging way to get content into long-term memory for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is some of the tools that could be used would be to use some of the social and emotional learning classroom strategies
Absolutely.
for bringing out the best in students as we go through all of these changes. Is that correct, or is there?
Exactly. So I've seen teachers virtually say, "Okay, you've been great. We just wrote your paragraph on this historical figure. Now we're
Mhm.
all going to do 10 sit-ups and 10 push-ups before we move on to the next part of the lesson.
Mm.
And it just
Mhm.
makes such a difference because the students have been stagnant, their interest was waning, and just that little break, the brain break, was enough to re-engage and
Mhm.
help prime them for the next section and get them excited.
Interesting. So students are they're one stakeholder in this whole emerging leadership thing within the educational system. But who are some of the other important stakeholders that should be considered?
Well, social emotional learning affects the community.
Mhm.
It affects any staff member at a school, whether you have direct contact with students or not. So in some of the schools we consult with, they set aside time just for the teachers to practice social emotional learning. And part of what we offer is, wait a second, the maintenance staff is part of the employee, they're part of the employee network at your school, the bus drivers,
Mhm.
the cafeteria personnel, all of those individuals cannot be forgotten. The front desk administrators and coordinators, that's all part of this ecosystem of the organizational culture for a school. And
Mhm.
none of them is immune, or none of them can get out of the responsibility of, of,
Mhm.
of being a social emotional learning advocate.
Mhm. Where do you think this is all headed? Where the educational system, leadership within it, like where is this going? Just based on your experience,
Always
or
fun to forecast with you,
uh,
Yvette. Always.
imagination, you know?
Oh, well, I can't remember the name exactly of this project that came out of Stanford. That was a design school project about what would university look like in the
Mhm.
next 50 years, or what should it look like in the next 10, even though, let's be
Mhm.
realistic, we take a while to make change in the education
Mhm.
system.
Mhm.
But the idea, that notion of the project, once they interviewed the stakeholders, was school is a lifelong process. So maybe in higher education, instead of going straight from high school into college, for example, and then graduate school, perhaps the college experience and the graduate experience are blended, and the technical experience are blended. And
Interesting.
university is something that you can be a part of for a lifetime. So it's really changing this idea that you're an alumna member. You're actually forever a student at said institution. And what that does is it opens up, and it's more realistic about careers now. So many
Mhm.
people, after 15, 20 years in one industry, try to cross into another industry. Or they realize they're at risk of losing their job if they don't retrain or add more technical skills or add more managerial skills.
Mhm.
And so for considering how many changes people will have to make to stay current on information, I believe this new system will be a lot more fluid. It will be
Mhm.
lifelong, and you can weave in and out of this throughout your career. So it takes it just no longer just an executive MBA, but more of an executive lifelong experience where you can go in with a project, take a
Mhm.
couple key classes that are relevant to your professional experience in the now, have a cohort of individuals doing the same that you can rely on, and have a community of support with some experts from the field, and then launch you back into that career profession. So that's what I envision for higher ed.
It's this is very interesting that you said that because I had a similar conversation because I enjoy Oriental costume drama. And in a lot of the costume dramas, they have the martial artists who they start off with school within their clan or whatever, and then they're sent out to have an experience of the world. And they start to not only start to put into practice what they were learning for so many years, but their talents, whatever is specific to them, it starts to emerge. And I find it very interesting that what you just described is very similar to that, going back to allowing your purpose or your talents or your genius to emerge using the educational system to support that. It really sounds that that's what you were saying.
Absolutely. That's-
Interesting. You know, this is such an interesting conversation, but I have to bring it to a close. So I have a favorite final question. And to all of the educators and any leaders, because I think what we've said here really applies to any leader. From your perspective, what would be the best piece of advice that you would like to leave them with at the end of this conversation?
I think, especially in times of uncertainty, and when we're talking about emerging leadership in schools, where at that level you are prone to decision fatigue just from the number of issues that you're presented with a day to solve. It's been what I've observed is that the more mature or effective leaders, because mature doesn't necessarily mean age. I should be very clear.
Yeah.
I've seen mature
Yeah.
leadership in people right out of school in their 20s, and I've seen immature leadership at the end of their careers as well, after 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say that those effective leaders really have a criteria for decision making that weaves their values, their
Mhm.
own personal values, and the organization's values together.
Yes.
And that has really helped them from prohibited them from this decision fatigue and supported them and buoyed them, especially in times of crisis. So that would be, if I
Mhm.
could send them off with one piece of advice, that would be consider your criteria, write them down, and share them with your staff.
Mhm. Powerful. With that, I'd like to, well, love to thank you, Sherilyn, for engaging my audience. And can you tell us where we can learn more about you, or if someone wants to contact you, which website they can go to?
Absolutely. Well, if you could read more about me and what I do at 6 Seconds at 6seconds.org, which is the number 6seconds.org. My email is Sherilyn, Cherilyn, at 6seconds.org. So the number
Mhm.
6seconds.org. And you can also find me on LinkedIn under Sherilyn Leet. And I'm located in Phoenix, Arizona. So that's the
And
Sherilyn
that's
Leet.
Sherilyn with a C, not an S.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So this has been Yvette Bethel and Sherilyn Leet. Thank you for taking the time to join us at Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. And you can contact me through my website, ifbnetwork.co, where we are an ecosystem of vibrant leaders who are challenging the leadership paradigm. With that, I'd love to say thank you, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. Join our vibrant network of leaders who are challenging the leadership paradigm in an innovative learning and impact network. Check out our webpage at ifbnetwork.co to learn more about and join our exciting ecosystem of high-performing leaders.